Welcome back to Mysterious Galaxies. I'm Todd. I've got my cup of coffee in hand, and I'm excited to dive into a book that was a huge part of my teenage years, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Now, this is a dystopian classic that I've been meaning to reread for quite a while, and I'm glad I finally got around to it. It's one of those books that gets mentioned again and again, so if you're like me and you've been meaning to get back into it, or you never did, now might be the time, especially as we're in this strange transitionary period of time. Now, let's talk about the man behind the madness, Aldous Huxley. If you don't know him, don't worry, I've got you covered. Huxley was a pretty fascinating guy, nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature no fewer than 9 times. Yes, 9. That's not a typo. And in case you didn't know, Huxley wasn't just an author, he was a philosopher too. His writing spans a variety of topics, but he started out writing satirical works, poking fun at the absurdities of society. Later on, he pivoted into more serious subjects, writing about the human consciousness, the search for meaning, and, well, the nature of existence itself. And yes, if you're wondering, he was a man on big ideas. It's not a stretch to say that he was a visionary in a lot of ways. One of the more wild facts about Huxley, just to add a bit more of a surreal touch to the guy's legacy, was that he requested 2 doses of LSD on his deathbed. I mean, what a way to go out, right? But here's the thing, this wasn't just some random acid trip he was after. Huxley had already spent years exploring altered states of consciousness, and his work, The Doors of Perception, which detailed his mescaline experiences, was even the inspiration behind the name of the iconic rock band, The Doors. How's that for a cultural ripple effect? The band and the book are forever linked in a way that no one could have predicted back in the day. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. So let's steer the ship back to Brave New World. This is a book that solidified Huxley's place in the literary canon, is the one that gets talked about the most, and for good reason. I'm sure many of you have heard of Brave New World in some form or another. It's been taught in some classrooms, banned in others, and has sparked endless debate since it was first published in 1932. In some ways, Brave New World is the perfect book for our age, as it asks the question, what happens when we trade our freedom and humanity for comfort and control? Brave New World opens with a chilling look at a future society that has quite literally perfected control over every single aspect of life. Imagine a world where everything, your genetics, your class, your desires, your relationships, they're all predetermined before you're even born. Now, if that sounds dystopian to you, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're introduced to a world state, a highly organized and rigid society that uses technology to dominate every facet of human existence. One of the first things we learn is that reproduction, once a natural process, has been replaced by mass production. Human beings are grown and manufactured in hatcheries, large sterile facilities where each individual is created on an assembly line. The babies are quite literally produced in artificial wombs and subjected to genetic engineering from the moment of conception. This is no ordinary world. In this society, every detail is controlled to ensure absolute stability. Everyone is cast into one of 5 social classes, from the alphas at the top to the epsilons at the bottom. Your caste is a determination at birth, and there's no room for deviation, no chance to rise above your station. It's a nightmare vision of totalitarianism, but with a twist. Rather than ruling through fear and repression, the system is held in place by pleasure, conformity, and the elimination of conflict. The citizens of this world are conditioned from birth to accept their roles, desires, and even their emotions without question. This isn't a place where people fight for individuality or personal freedom. In fact, the very concept of individuality has been bred out of existence. Instead of parents, children are raised collectively with no sense of family, no sense of belonging beyond their caste. But things still get darker. There was a war, a cataclysmic event that altered the course of history. A 9 year long conflict marked by chemical warfare, anthrax bombs, biological weapons, and untold destruction. And they all devastate the world. The result? A new era of absolute peace, but one that comes at the cost of everything human beings hold dear. Gone are the days of uncertainty and risk. Gone is the very idea of conflict or struggle. The world that arises from this war is one of clinical perfection. It's sanitized, controlled, and unnervingly efficient. Society thrives on stability, and that stability is maintained through the complete removal of any disruptive force. There's no room of rebellion here, no space for dissent. The people are happy because they don't know they're missing anything. At the core of this society is a drug called soma. This is the solution to almost every problem. Soma is a kind of chemical utopia, a drug that allows the citizens to remain in a state of blissful contentment. When people begin to feel anxious, sad, or restless, they simply take a dose of soma. And just like that, the unpleasant feelings fade away. It's like the ultimate pacifier, the perfect sedative for a world where happiness is no longer a natural state of being. It's a place where the pursuit of happiness is less about joy and more about control. Pleasure has been reduced to a formula. It's not real satisfaction, it's an illusion of happiness. People are taught to seek it, to consume it, to live for it, but without ever questioning if it's worth it. And this is a world where sex is regulated as everything else. People are encouraged to engage in casual, mindless sex with as many people as possible. What's the point of attachment when you can just have a fleeting encounter and move on? There's no real passion, no real love. Sex was once a deeply human experience, is now just another tool used to keep people docile and obedient. It's free, it's easy, and it's always available. But is it fulfilling? Not in the slightest. It's sterile, just like everything else in this brave new world. The people of this society never question their existence because they don't have to. They're content in a way. They've been conditioned to be that way. Their minds are filled with slogans and propaganda which they've absorbed from childhood. One of the more terrifying aspects of this world is something called hypnopadia, a form of sleep teaching in which children are conditioned to accept the rules of the world without even knowing it. From a young age, they're programmed with values and beliefs while they sleep, so by the time they wake, there's no question in their minds. They've been taught what to think and what to believe from the very start. But, as you might expect, things don't always stay perfect forever. At the heart of Brave New World lies a question. What happens when every individual is stripped of their uniqueness? What happens when everyone is genetically engineered to fit into a specific role in society, when they've been conditioned to never question their purpose, their happiness, or their existence? What happens when the pursuit of happiness becomes a suppression of everything that makes us human, the things that give us depth and passion and meaning? When life is nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion, can anyone really say they're alive? Huxley doesn't just show us the horrors of this world, he pushes us to consider whether such a world could ever be possible. Could we as a society fall into this trap? Would we ever willingly sacrifice our personal freedom and individuality for the sake of stability and happiness? And when these questions begin to take hold, Huxley introduces us to the individuals who inevitably question everything: Bernard Marx and John the Savage. Bernard Marx is an outsider, a man who doesn't fit the mold. He's an alpha, one of the highest classes, but he feels different from the others. He doesn't enjoy the same easy contentment that everyone else seems to have. He's aware that something's missing, but he doesn't know what it is. He feels isolated and alienated from the world he's supposed to fit in. And that's where the conflict begins. In this world, if you don't fit in, you're made to feel like you're the problem. So Bernard struggles. He's out of place, emotionally disconnected, and uncertain. And then there's John, the savage. John was born outside of the controlled world state in a place called the Savage Reservation, where life is still governed by natural rules, by birth, death, and struggle. John is the product of a forbidden encounter between a member of the world state, Linda, and a man she was traveling with. Raised outside the system, John is introduced to Shakespeare and the world of literature, his only education. But when he's brought back to the world state, the contrast between his raw, passionate humanity and the sanitized, controlled society he's introduced to is both stark and painful. The ultimate clash comes when John is thrust into a world he can barely comprehend. His response is a mirror for us all. What would we do if we were suddenly confronted with a world that traded genuine emotion, passion, and meaning for shallow contentment? It's in this contrast between the purity of life on the reservation and the hollow perfection of the world state that Brave New World comes alive. This isn't just a story about a dystopian future. It's a question about human nature. When everything is controlled, When every desire is suppressed, and when everything is reduced to a formula of happiness, does life still have meaning? The answers may be disturbing, but it's that tension that makes Huxley's vision so timeless. So let me be upfront with you. Is Brave New World good? Well, yes and no. It's a bit of a mixed bag for me, and it depends on how you approach the book. On the one hand, the philosophical and thematic elements in this book are incredibly compelling and still eerily relevant today. Brave New World presents a world where happiness is enforced, where individual choice is all but eliminated, and where truth is sacrificed for the sake of comfort. In that respect, the book functions as a terrifying critique of the pursuit of a technological utopia, a world where everything is engineered to perfection. Huxley doesn't just critique technology itself, but the belief that technology can and should solve every human problem. There's a deep exploration of the dangers of giving up control over our lives, trading the messiness of true human experience for sterile stability and superficial happiness. Now, think about that for a moment. Does this idea not feel relevant today? Whether it's the growing trend of social media algorithms that feed us exactly what we want to hear, the increase in automation, or even the push for perfectly controlled environments, whether in our cities or in our homes, the echoes of Huxley's world feels almost too close to comfort. Brave New World poses a chilling question. What happens when technology removes all friction, all challenge, and all meaningful struggle from our lives? In this world, humanity has traded its depth and diversity for a quiet, contented uniformity. That's a pretty stark warning about the future, and honestly, it makes you think. But here's the kicker. While the ideas themselves are fascinating and incredibly well crafted, the story itself, in my opinion, falls flat. I mean, for all the brilliant world building and the mind bending philosophical questions, the characters just don't quite do it for me. Bernard Marx, for example, he starts out with a lot of potential. He's an alpha, part of the elite class, but he's an outsider in his own society. He's not satisfied with the shallow existence everyone else seems to embrace. There's real promise in his character. He could have been the emotional heart of the story, the character who represents our struggles against a society that's demanding total conformity. Yet, as the novel progresses, Bernard's character just kind of fizzles out. Huxley doesn't really give us a satisfying arc for him. Instead, he morphs into a passive figure who, rather than actively challenging the world around him, becomes swept along by the events outside of his control. And this is where the book feels like it's missing something essential. Bernard could have been the embodiment of the tension between the individual and the system, but instead he becomes more of a tool to move the philosophical discussion forward. And then there's John the Savage. John is meant to be the antithesis of the world state. Raised outside of it in the savage reservation, he represents everything that the world state has tried to suppress: raw human emotion, genuine passion, and the complexity of life. John is introduced to this sterilized society, and his shock and horror at it form some of the most tragic and powerful moments in the book. His very existence is an affront to the world state, which thrives on uniformity and order. But just like Bernard, John ends up feeling more like a symbol than a fully realized character. He's the embodiment of humanity's lost potential, the painful reminder of what we've sacrificed for the sake of comfort and control. But while John could have been the soul of the book, the character who really pulls us into the heart of the conflict, he too becomes more of a mouthpiece for Huxley's ideas. In this sense, both Bernard and John serve a larger function. They're not fully fleshed out characters in their own right, but rather instruments used to illustrate Huxley's philosophical points. And that's where I think the book suffers. It becomes less of a narrative and more of an essay. The ideas take center stage, but the characters feel secondary. There's a lack of depth to them that I found frustrating, especially when you consider how much potential these characters had to drive a more compelling story forward. I wanted to see Bernard struggle more against his society, to see him actively fight for his individuality rather than just existing as a passive observer. I wanted to see John's experience in the world state develop into something more profound than just shock and outrage. But instead, the narrative becomes more about the ideas than about what these characters go through emotionally and psychologically. Now, this isn't to say that Brave New World doesn't have its share of powerful moments. The moments where Huxley lets us in on the true cost of the perfect world, where people are chemically sedated, where love and passion are replaced by mindless sex, where individuality is an afterthought, those moments are devastating and eye opening. The philosophical arguments about happiness and stability, the cost of a perfect society, and the dangers of mass control are all extremely well articulated. And that's why Brave New World has remained a classic. It's not just that Huxley created this great world, but the idea it explores about humanity's future and our relationship with technology, control, and conformity. But again, for me, the strength of the ideas doesn't quite compensate for the weakness of the narrative. Huxley's skill as a writer is clear, but I think he's so focused on delivering his message that he lets the story itself take a back seat. It becomes less about the characters and their struggles and more about the philosophical exploration of what happens when society removes everything that makes us human. It's fascinating, it's chilling, but it's also impersonal. So, is Brave New World good? The answer really depends on what you're looking for. If you're after a story with well developed characters who go on a journey, face challenges, and evolve, this book may not be what you're looking for. But if you're interested in a thought provoking, mind expanding examination of society, technology, and human nature, then Brave New World is absolutely worth your time. It's a brilliant work in terms of its foresight, its warnings about where we could be heading, and its exploration of the tension between individuality and control. But don't expect a gripping character driven narrative. It's the ideas that shine here, not the people. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't read Brave New World. On the contrary, if you're looking for something that'll make you think long after you've closed the book, if you're someone who's interested in chilling, thought provoking, and eerily prescient takes on where society might be headed, this is absolutely a book you should read. Huxley's vision of the future isn't just science fiction, it's a warning. A warning that is as relevant now, if not more so, than when it was first written in 1932. What makes Brave New World so impactful, so haunting, is how well Huxley understood the trajectory of humanity and the potential dark paths we might take if we're not careful. He saw the allure of technology, the dangers of too much stability, and how easy it would be to surrender individuality for the sake of comfort. And here's the crazy thing, he wasn't just speculating. Some of the ideas that seem absurd and over the top back in Huxley's time now feel eerily close to home. When Huxley wrote Brave New World, it was during a period of rapid technological advancement and societal change, much like the world we live in now. His world is a terrifying vision where technology doesn't just serve humanity, it controls it, it molds it, and eliminates everything that makes us inherently human. The book's emphasis on genetic engineering, artificial reproduction, and mind control feels almost prophetic when you think about the direction we're headed in terms of gene editing technologies, surveillance, and the massive influence of corporations on our daily lives. Huxley saw the seeds of these issues and he anticipated where they could lead if we weren't careful. But it's not just about technology. Brave New World also touches on some uncomfortable truths about the human condition. The people in Huxley's world are perfectly content, but they're also empty. They've traded depth for stability. They've traded passion for comfort. They've traded freedom for happiness, and that's been artificially manufactured. If you're someone who's ever wondered what happens when everyone is forced to be the same, when conflict and individuality are erased in favor of a perfect, smooth existence, well, this book gives you an answer. And the answer is unsettling, to say the least. You might look at this world and think, hey, who wouldn't want a stable, blissed out life where everyone is equal and no one ever has to experience pain or hardship? But Brave New World asks a critical question. What are we losing when we give up our right to struggle, to grow, and to change? Huxley's world is one that's devoid of meaning, because meaning only comes from an experiencing life in its raw, unpredictable chaos. It's a dark, twisted version of the American dream. A world where everyone is happy, yes, but at the cost of everything that makes us human. The creativity, the messiness, the potential for greatness and failure, all of it is sacrificed for a life that's easy, predictable, and empty. Huxley wasn't just warning us about the dangers of an all powerful state or corporate control, he was also exploring the cost of convenience. In a world where everything is provided, where all needs are met and all choices are made for you, what do we lose? Brave New World makes the case that we lose our sense of self. We lose the depth of human experience, we lose the ability to fight for something real, and without those things, what's left? Is happiness really worth having if it's just a result of chemicals, propaganda, and manipulation? This is where the philosophical heart of Brave New World lies, in the tension between individual desire and societal control. It forces readers to confront the uncomfortable truth that the pursuit of happiness at all costs can lead to a kind of soulless existence. And here's the thing, you don't need to look too hard to see this world beginning to manifest in small ways today. From the way social media algorithms manipulate our desires and opinions to the growing power of big tech corporations that track and shape our behavior. Huxley's vision of a society controlled by its own desires feels less like fiction and more like a warning bell that we're just not paying enough attention to. If you've sat back and wondered where we're heading as a society, if you've ever questioned how much technology, convenience, and conformity should shape our lives, then Brave New World is a book you should absolutely have to read. It's not just about the future, it's about our future. It's about understanding the dangers of pursuing happiness at the expense of everything else that makes us human. It's about considering whether a world without conflict, without struggle, and without individuality is really a world worth living in. But beyond the terrifying insights into a possible future, Huxley's work also forces us to look inward. The idea of stability and comfort is so tempting. How often do we sacrifice our own uniqueness, our own voice, our own challenges in order to fit in? It's easy to think that we'll never fall into the traps Huxley outlines in Brave New World, but the book serves as a chilling reminder of how easily that might happen if we're not vigilant. In a society where everyone is connected, everyone is consumed by entertainment, and everything is provided for us, how do we keep from losing ourselves in the process? Brave New World doesn't just ask these questions, it demands that we answer them. For anyone interested in the direction of our modern world, Huxley's exploration of mass consumption, genetic engineering, and the quest for a perfect society offers more than just a cautionary tale. It's a guidebook for thinking critically about the values we hold dear today, and a blueprint for understanding the cost of that pursuit. It's unsettling, yes, but it's exactly the kind of unsettling we need to be aware of. So, if you're someone who likes to think about where technology, social media, and even our consumer driven culture are taking us, this is the book for you. It's dark, it's twisted, and it's a vision of the future that should keep you awake at night, pondering where we might be heading. Ultimately, Brave New World is a book that will challenge you. It will make you question what it means to be human, what makes life worth living, and how much we're willing to sacrifice in the name of comfort and stability. It's a horrifying yet fascinating read that will stay with you long after the last page is turned. To wrap it all up, Brave New World isn't just a book, it's a warning. It's a book that's been banned, debated, and dissected for decades because it doesn't just tell a story. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our future. Huxley crafted a world so eerily precise in his predictions about societal control, technological dominance, and the consequences of sacrificing individuality for the sake of comfort that it feels almost prophetic. For all of its flaws, its underdeveloped characters, its overly essayistic nature, it has an uncanny ability to predict where society might go if we keep chasing that shiny, perfect ideal. Huxley wasn't writing just another dystopia type of novel. He was writing a cautionary tale about where we might find ourselves if we continue to prioritize convenience, stability, and happiness over raw, real human experiences. It's a society where everything is engineered to eliminate conflict, to eliminate depth, and to eliminate struggle. And while that may sound appealing on the surface, what you're left with is a hollow existence that sacrifices what makes us truly human. Now, as I've mentioned before, the book isn't without its shortcomings. Bernard and John, the two characters meant to carry the emotional weight of the story, often feel more like philosophical tools than real people. They're there to illustrate Huxley's point, to show us the dangers of this highly controlled society. But that's the thing, Brave New World is much more about the ideas it presents than the characters themselves. For me, this was both the book's strengths and the weakness. The philosophical exploration of happiness, control, and societal stability is what keeps the book alive, but the lack of fully realized characters and an underwhelming narrative makes it harder to connect with on a personal level. That being said, if you're someone who enjoys dystopian literature or you're looking for a book that pushes you to think about where we're headed, Brave New World is definitely worth a read. It may be a tough one in some ways. It's philosophical, it's bleak, and it's not a narrative driven experience, but it's worth it for the ideas alone. Huxley's vision is powerful enough to make us stop and think about the kind of world we want to live in, and the kind of world we're at risk of building if we aren't careful. The beauty of Brave New World isn't just in the world Huxley created. It's in how it forces us to reckon with the choices we make every day, both as individuals and as a society. It's a tough, unsettling mirror reflecting our potential future. And whether we like it or not, it's up to us to decide whether that future is one we'll embrace or one we'll fight against. And that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends, families, and even your enemies. And of course, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because every subscriber inches me one step closer to taking over the galaxies. Until next time, take care, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one.